Schönen guten Abend, herzlich willkommen im Architekturzentrum Wien, dem Österreichischen Architekturmuseum. Welcome to the AZW, the Austrian Architecture Museum, to the 13th edition of our series IBA Meets Architect. It's a series in cooperation of the AZW with the IBA Vienna, the International Building Exhibition for New Social Housing. In the last years, we discussed buildings and new typologies of housing, but also widened our perspective to the scale of neighborhoods. And we had a very special focus on dealing with the already existing, be it the historic city or post-war estates. This year's series is dedicated to the spaces in between, the open spaces, which are crucial for good towns and cities in the future. I think all of us learned that during the pandemics, we should have known better even earlier. The topic of this year's series also fits perfectly with the core interest of our museum, shown in projects such as exhibitions and publications, critical care, architecture and urbanism for a broken planet, or the exhibition Land for Us All, but also with the hot questions put forward in our new permanent collection, which is on display next door. How can green spaces and water infrastructure contribute to a good life in the face of climate crisis, and how can they promote social equality? How can densely built up residential districts in Vienna be integrated into blue and green infrastructure? And what are examples from other cities to learn from? And what role does activism and participation and collaboration play in such an approach? I'm sure that we will learn a lot tonight as we expect an exciting lecture of Johanna Gibson from L Gibbons Landscape Architecture in London. These landscape architects are known for their pioneering work in landscape architecture and for their visionary design processes which combine education, research, and activism. They have realized a range of truly inspiring projects which can also be inspiring for Vienna. And I'm very happy that Jo Gibson accepted the invitation to give this lecture tonight. Also, she can't be here with us due to urgent family matters, but I think all of us by now are used to hybrid formats and we will manage very well. But with us tonight is Daniel Zimmermann from 3:0 Landschaftsarchitektur, 320, how do you say it in English? No English expression. Landscape architects from Vienna. And I'm very pleased that he will take on the role of the respondent tonight, following Johanna's presentation. And we will then enter into a joint discussion, trying to mirror the learnings in the context of Vienna. But before we start with all this, I have the pleasure to introduce Kurt Hofstetter, who is our dear partner in this long-lasting series between AZW and IBA Wien. Welcome, Kurt.
Thank you, Angelika. I'm not sure, I think it's 4 years now in our series, and it's number 13 of IBA Meets Architects. It makes me very happy that it kind of developed into IBA Meets Landscape Architects this time, because as due to my education on university, I'm a landscaper, the topic is always very dear to me, and it's very important, and it's more and more important when we see how our world is developing. And also the qualities in landscape architecture has just increased a lot during the years. So it's very good to see what is possible, how things come together. And that's why I'm very happy that in the last year of our cooperation as IBA and AZW, we can also focus on this topic, which is so important. Also for the topic of housing. International Building Exhibition is about housing. It's about new social housing, and that is not reduced to the house. It's about neighborhood, it's about open space, and so I'm very much looking forward to hear and see Joe Gibbons, and I think, Joe, if you're ready, you can start. Thank you so much. Oh, you can note. So I was asked to do so.
Sorry, I didn't want to cause any chaos. I just want to do a proper introduction of Johanna Gibbons. I always say Gibson. Sorry, Joe. Gibbons. I'm very sorry for that. Jo Gibbons is a landscape architect. She's a fellow of the Landscape Institute, a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, and commissioner with the Jersey Architectural Commission. She was trained in landscape architecture at Edinburgh College of Art and is founding partner of G and L Gibbons, established in 1968. She is also founding director of Landscape Learn, a social enterprise established in 2016 to advance a wider understanding and appreciation about the landscapes we design, inhabit, and influence. Jo is a member of various advisory panels, including Historic England's Historic Places panel and the Forestry Commission's Forestry and Woodland Advisory Committee. She's a trustee of Open City, a charity promoting people-centered cities, and a core research partner of Urban Mind, a cross-disciplinary project led by King College London. She advocates for the profession. I think we already can tell that from all her engagements. She advocates for the profession on an international stage, lectures widely, and has published several research publications, most recently, Conversations on Urban Forestry. And about urban forestry, I think we're also going to see and learn quite a lot in her lecture. She was nominated Royal Designer of Industry by the RSA for her pioneering and influential work combining design with activism, education, and professional practice. I'm very happy that she's here tonight, at least virtually. Welcome, Jo Gibbons.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. And I obviously wish I was with you, and particularly because these IT issues are very irritating. And so I do apologize for that if it was my end. But thank you very much for inviting me to share some of our experiences with you. And I'd like to open your eyes to the reciprocity and relationships contained in locally informed responses to design, and particularly in this era of urban intensification. So the name of the talk being Shared Territories, and close to home was something that we suggested in response to your particular issues and interests in Vienna. And the work of the landscape architect, we feel, is very, very pertinent to these endeavors. And I want to focus on 3 projects today. But first, before I do, let me just go. I just wanted to show you, this is home for me. And I commissioned this memorandum to the street. It's a ghost sign designed by Pentagram, and it's painted on the side of my house. And it's a reminder to take action, as there is no time to lose. We need to take responsibility as a community for our home, and this is our home. This photograph in particular has been my inspiration. It's called Earthrise, and it was taken on the Apollo mission. And it was the first time that the Earth had been photographed in this way over the barren landscape of the moon, a finite entity of such beauty on which we all cohabit And this is our common ground. It's so precious, and particularly at this time of turmoil, of conflict, of climate change, biodiversity loss, and the pandemic. Make no mistake, everything is connected. And our design stable, our design foundation, if you like, is Design with Nature by Ian McHarg. And it defines our ethos, a holistic ethos based on a natural systems approach, which is regenerative in protecting, restoring, and rejuvenating, and acting in an ecocentric way rather than an egocentric way, with a deep understanding of the pluriverse, and that is the interdependence of all life on Earth. And when we talk of critical infrastructure, we're thinking urban forestry, soil biodiversity, sustainable water management. And we're also thinking of the critical infrastructure of communities, recognizing the value and resilience of nature, natural regeneration, whether it's in a gutter or on a brownfield site. Look at this life force, a life force directly connected and related to our own. I planted this woodland 20 years ago, and I feel connected to its health and to its vigor. Humanity is designed to be connected to the natural world, so that is not surprising. Tree planting in the city or urban forestry requires vision for the long term, technical know-how, appreciation of context above and below ground. And this, for instance, is a route that is seeking gaseous exchange, and in busting open the tarmac surface to get that oxygen, it is creating the opportunity for new life. And this tells us a lot about resilience, and it gives us a lot of clues about how we should be designing. What lies below is mind-blowing. It's the key to our planet's future. Soil is, and compost, this is my compost heap at home, is what we call black gold. It's life itself, the miracle of more microbes in a handful than people on this earth. An astonishing ecosystem designed not for intensive farming, but to support and provide for all terrestrial life, a biodynamic landscape above and below ground, which is irreplaceable. And if we take this into the urban context, the urban forest is actually not a new idea, but since the Industrial Revolution, it has a new purpose, and that is to mitigate the impacts of the result of the Industrial Revolution itself. It is to mitigate the heat island effect, to mitigate pollution, to mitigate the issues that we have with extreme events, to mitigate climate change, to cool the city, to create a leafy city. It is also there, and it creates a city that is livable. It is a resource, the urban forest, valued as much by John Evelyn way back in 1666, when he wrote this very strong proposition about the importance of resource management as it is today. And I'm part of a pressure group called Trees and Design Action Group. And this publication and all our publications are free. And this was a very important manifesto about the importance of trees in our cities, which are linked also to our fundamental identity and survival. It's a resource of immense biomass and biodiversity, a resource that has been managed by humanity over millennia for timber, underpinning the economy of nations, deeply reflective of our culture and identity. And it's the urban forest, as I said, which we're now investigating how much can it mitigate the effects of climate change, cooling and oxygenating the air we breathe, not to mention the carbon sequestration. And this is one of the largest experiments in Birmingham University, which is pumping CO2 into an existing oak woodland to literally see how much it can sequester and to mimic potentially an environment that might be prevalent in the year 2050. The urban forest is also a vital resource to mitigate extreme events. The urban forest intercepts rainfall, it enhances the sponginess of soils, and it slows the flow. Extreme events which actually are to do with us having sealed our cities and sealed our soils. And these are events that are happening every weekend in the wintertime. It's not happening every 100 years. So we need to reverse this trend. We need to depave our lives and we need to depave our cities. And it seems so simple, doesn't it, to plant trees? But actually the urban reality is complex and it requires design and technical ingenuity. So I thought I'd give you an insight, a taste, if you like, of our work. We've been in practice for 35 years. And so, but before I go into 3 projects, I thought I'd just highlight that the projects that, if you like, are work in progress at the moment, which all take these themes of soil biodiversity, urban forestry, and sustainable urban drainage and community engagement to the heart of these projects. And this is a lot of cultural opportunities that we're having here so we can reach a large audience. And one project is the Urban Nature Project at the Natural History Museum, which actually maps out the whole of deep time, the whole evolution of plant form and geological sequence through the extinctions, and then looks to the future. And then in Oslo, we've created a tiny piece of a pocket handkerchief, if you like, of enormous biodiversity, which is designed to receive an enormous and very evocative sculpture by Tracy Emin, and Any Minute Now, which is at the Munch Museum. And in Smithfield, the Museum of London, we're looking at decolonization of plant material and to look at how the geology, this layer cake of London, has actually influenced the evolution of our city. Whereas in the Physic Garden at the Palace of Holyrood up in Edinburgh, we're interpreting the multiple layers of extraordinary archaeology there, and the place of the first botanic gardens in the UK. And these 3 projects I thought would be interesting in the context of this evening's talk, because they have stood the test of time. And as a landscape architect, it is the long-term sustainability, after all, that we're related with, that we're interested in, and that relate to this critical issue of sustainability. They're all located in London, and this outline is Greater London. And I want to start with Canal Park. And I don't know how many of you have visited the Olympic Park. It's a huge success. And it created 200 acres of new parkland and a whole new neighborhood. And there was a North Park that was designed by LUC, Land Use Consultants, a South Park designed by Field Operations, and then a much lesser known park, which we were involved in and charged to deliver, called Canal Park. And that's related to 3 planning obligations, which was in transforming this industrial area of London into a new neighbourhood to create a lasting legacy following the Olympics. And Canal Park, you can just see on the left-hand side of this slide here, is an existing heritage landscape along the canal, which was designed and constructed in the 18th century, and a threshold, if you like, for those who live in and work in Hackney Wick Fish Island. So existing communities meeting new communities as a result of the Olympic legacy, divided by this, or joined, if you like, by this canal system. And we felt that this interface was absolutely critical, not only physically, but also in terms of the way in which we develop the design with through community engagement. And we felt we could express this funny place in terms of ecological patchiness. It was bookended by woodland, north and south, and it had a various widths to this parkland, from 5 to 50 meters wide, and about 2 kilometers long. And there were 3 critical aspects of this. Firstly, community engagement, because it was the vital ground between, as I said, existing and new communities. The second aspect was the hidden historical infrastructure of 2 huge water mains, which you see on this section here, which provide all the water to a large section of London. They're absolutely irreplaceable, and they're Victorian infrastructure, so they're very, very valuable and important to secure and protect. And the third aspect was the mediation between the canal, the adjacent existing community, and the level of the Queen Elizabeth Park, which was a much higher level, and to embrace that in a design language that alluded to the picturesque. And in doing that, taking what existed, the joy and the hope of the existing self-seeded urban ecology, which was flourishing despite multiple acts of human disturbance and intervention, that together determined the layering of design parameters, and together determined for us the landscape character. And we took seriously, as we always do, engagement with young people, as well as many other sectors of the community. And here we are with the youth panel. And this was the Olympic youth panel that were involved in all planning applications. We engaged with them by doing a walk along the canal, picking wildflowers, taking them to this community hall, identifying them, and then raising an exhibition together of our work, which acted as a nice participatory way of looking at the designs and discussing their attributes. So engaging with the landscape itself and what was there was for these young people the first time they'd ever done this. We also had many other activities and action research, as we call it. And this was very successful, where I chartered a large canal boat, and we invited multiple different representatives of the community. And in doing this together, created a kind of shared experience. So together we cruised up and down the canal to look at both sides of this urban landscape from the point of view of the water, discussing, observing, enjoying, and participating together. Anyone could stand up and talk about their neighborhood. We had food and drink on the boat, and we took our time and we sailed slowly up and down the canal. And we also went cycling with the cycling groups. We hooked up with artistic groups, with local enterprises, the wildlife trusts, and many others to catalogue their aspirations and to involve them in the process of design. And we collaborated with other research partners, and this was a really interesting project about unique clones of the black poplar, which is a tree, a very, very large tree, which really defines the character of this part of London and which is endangered. And so in doing that, we were engaging in a vital discourse on cultural significance as much as biosecurity. And we evolved an embellished towpath, if you like, a sequence of riparian experiences. And we instigated careful resource management and protection of heritage assets and of the soils. And we promoted biodiversity as play. And there was a requirement as part of our work to provide a quota of both biodiversity and play. And what we did, we overlapped the two, creating this playful wet landscape, so that in fact we could create more of both. And we tried to repurpose existing assets, saying to our clients, why spend a lot of money building a playground when this big old willow tree does just fine. We felt it important to communicate and illustrate these relationships of past, present, and future in an evocative way. And we did that through sectional studies, sectional elevations, in order that you could appreciate how the new development platforms, when they were built, would relate in terms of scale. And we evocatively, I hope you'll agree, illustrated our intentions, not as an impression, but as a really detailed intent that we knew we could deliver. And this is one part of the completed project. This is the former media center. It's now transformed as a creative business community, fully occupied and appreciated by those who seek the release and, if you like, the decompression that this very feral landscape can offer. And moving on to Angel Building, which is a retrofit, and it's very much ahead of its time in terms of low carbon development. And we inherited chronic compacted soils, which were degraded, and an existing 80s structure and landscape into which we were to breathe new life. Quite simply, the feasibility of this project depended on our design of a temporary construction access to extend, to be able to build extended floor plates through protected root zones. And it is now, as a result, you can see a detail of the access road that we created on the left-hand side there, which had very specific aggregate that had the required pH that would protect the rooting zone that lay below, with irrigation and ways in which we could capture any oil spill. So it was a very interesting challenge, and this is now upheld as an exemplar in the industry in demonstrating how to achieve a close relationship of the new facade and the existing trees. And you can see the old concrete structure on the left there, deep in the building, and the new facade and floor plates being layered on. And this is to offer, in doing this, we offered the continuity of the tree canopy, and also 15 years on, the proof of the value of taking care in this way is evidenced in the vigor and establishment of the whole environment, both the new tree planting that you see in the distance there, as well as the existing trees that were planted in the 80s. And this was much to do with depaving, opening and protecting soils to be able to integrate the green infrastructure in a way that provided a transformation of threshold to both the building and the street, that gave breathing space, a place to relax with a below ground technical strategy of linked routing zones to sustain and secure the successful establishment of this new planting. And the third project is making space in Dalston, which was fascinating and a real challenge. And it has many aspects to it, one being the urban ecology of anthropogenic soils and ruderal vegetation, which if anyone goes on site onto a brownfield site and says there's nothing there, they really need to put their glasses on, because the urban ecology is actually much richer in many instances than the ecology that you find in so-called greenfield sites. And then we try to visualize this interlinked ecosystem in this very dense urban area. And we try to illustrate this in a way that showed how people and plants and soils and microclimate were all interconnected. And the project didn't start well because we were asked to come in once many mistakes had been made. It was a project that was about creating new oversight development onto new infrastructure for the Olympic Park. And this had been done by Transport for London without sufficient engagement with the local community. And so the Greater London Authority came to us and said, will you help? Because we have dissent, we have angry community, and we have actually rioting in the chambers, and change was coming too quickly, and the local community didn't feel that they had any control over it. So we negotiated a 6-month period where we could try and do some careful mapping, and we could try and build some trust. And so we mapped the whole open space resource around in the neighborhood. We mapped the existing activities and cultural interconnections through engagement, through talking to people. It's a very creative quarter of London. And we did this to, create a process that was very inclusive. It wasn't linear, and it was quite messy as well, with continual feedback, so that the suggestions and the ideas that the community came forward with could be incorporated into the evolution of design briefs and design output, and then be fed back to the community for further comment. And this process is now called deliberative planning, but it was quite new at the time. And this was a highly collaborative project between us and Muff Architecture Art, which our two practices create I'd say, a very potent cocktail of creativity. And then from this, these principles, key principles, emerged for the project, which was to first value what was there, and then to nurture what was possible, and then only then start to design and define what was missing. And the community helped us define those projects. And what we did is we had many, many workshops and activities in community space, not in our clients' offices, so that the community would feel comfortable, they felt involved. We'd do it around food, everyone felt relaxed and they could talk about their neighborhoods because they know them best, right? And out of that came a sort of powerful and practical solution and notion of creating a discontinuous park. We didn't have a big piece of land to create a single act of green infrastructure, and really, in a way, much more useful to create local improvements to the public realm on the doorstep of the communities, rather than in places which are hard to reach if you're a 5-year-old. We then visualize those together to make something meaningful connections. And we were actually only asked to come forward with 10 projects, but such was the response to our methodology of engaging and involving people that we evolved a plan for 76 projects, which we then put into 10 themes, and then we secured funding out of that. And these are the 10 projects which we secured funding. This was the front runners, if you like, of the projects, and some have followed since this action was taken. So it was hard fought, and we levered in £1 million to do these 10 projects, which were on the doorstep of the community, so that could have real impact on the day-to-day life. And I just want to focus in on one, which is the Dalston Eastern Curve, which was really a hidden piece of ground. And it was only through talking to the local community and getting to know them that this piece of land was drawn to our attention. And we thought it was such a wonderful opportunity, if you like, to reveal and celebrate brownfield ecology on what was old railway land. And we didn't just do this as a design exercise. We knew that if we were to bring forward a park, a small micro park like this, or pocket park, we needed to have the community with us. We needed to have the governance structure designed, if you like, at the same time as the design for the park itself. And to do that, we held many discussions with all the different creative and community groups to try and activate this idea of caretaking, this idea that a design doesn't fall from the sky and then you say, aren't you lucky, to the community, you have this new park. No, it needs to actually grow out of the ground in collaboration with key individuals and key community groups. It needs to evolve out of genuine engagement that enhances skills, creating apprenticeships, so that the young people can become part of the vision. And in a challenging site like this, our first move actually was, if you like, to prime the site, to prime the community and prime our client to show that change could be positive. There'd been, with all this change as a result of the Olympic Park, so there's a lot of negativity in the community, and we wanted to demonstrate how change could be positive. And so an opportunity to collaborate with the Barbican Art Gallery and with Exist, who are an artist collective, came about. And for a short time, the ground became a wheat field, and Agnes Dennis planted that wheat field, and Exist created this mill. They camped in the tower above it, and the community were invited to come and bake bread, and it was hugely successful. We had every part of the community coming, and 13,000 people came through the door in a very short period of time. And from that point on, that gave a sense of optimism that something good could happen. And so working with our ecologists and communicating how, you know, a changing perception of urban ecology could be to such great benefit for the local community, and the beauty, if you like, of resilient vegetation. We commenced to make this transformation. And in doing so, we revealed the impacts of previous human disregard, and we had to act swiftly to find good local clay soil resource to cap over and create a root zone that was wide and shallow, and then alter the planting vision so that we could work to create a planting plan that would be suitable for these soils. And that was a pioneer forest planting, the pioneer woodland, surviving very successfully on shallow soils. And also to make this place accessible with a vision of an immersive forest in due course that could provide sanctuary, that could provide a place away from it all, but on the doorstep. And it was a provocation in a way. And we did encourage our client to reflect on this process, because it wasn't easy, it took time. And we wanted to make sure that if this word localism was what the politicians was wanting to initiate, then this is what it took. It would take a lot of effort and a lot of time and commitment from the design team and from the community to create that feeling of being able to be comfortable in a space, throw off your shoes, and have that sense of tranquility and connection with nature that we were seeking. Providing that essential contact for young people, where very few homes have easy access, have gardens or easy access to green infrastructure, even though in certain neighborhoods there are very big parks. They're not necessarily that accessible, and that's the case with regard to this neighborhood. So the mental and physical stimulation that having a place where you could quietly understand natural processes is incredibly valuable for the mental well-being, the health and well-being of the communities. And over the decade, the garden has evolved from garden really to a cultural phenomenon of international renown, managed by a social enterprise made of people who were part of that whole journey with us. The canopy has now closed, creating a haven, protected, that's tranquil and biodiverse, a place where people can gather, to share, to grow, to breathe. And where we are now is part of the fight to save it, to protect it, because not all the land belongs to the council. Part of it belongs to a developer. And so pro bono, a couple of years ago, we acted as critical friends to create what we termed a proof of evidence, gathering statements from everyone that we knew, who we invited to the garden to give us their thoughts, and to establish what we called the currencies of value of this little space. And then we delivered that proof of evidence in a very formal way to the local authority, and that derailed some of the planning framework that was going on, which would have jeopardized the garden. Because we couldn't believe it, to jeopardize a garden which is actually giving so much, and which was has been so successful, not least as a hub for research. And our research, which is called Urban Mind, which we're collaborating on with King's College London and an artist collective called Nomad Projects, is about evidencing the beneficial impacts of bioaccumulation. And this garden created was one of the hubs where this research was carried out. Because it was known that this was a place where people would come at the end of their day for their fix, if you like, that vital dose of nature that sets straight the complexities of life in the city. And probably we estimate over 150,000 people a year come to this little garden, which is just 0.2 of a hectare. You can see the urban forest in the background there, how it's grown. And this actually, I just thought this is a lovely photograph because it's of the community queuing to view not a Tracy Emin exhibition, but the pumpkin carving that everyone had been involved in. So just to close, I want to talk about the macro and the micro, because size doesn't matter. You know, the Dalston Eastern Curve Garden, as I said, is 0.2 of a hectare, but it is part of this wider strategic endeavour. And that is the London Plan. And this is part of the London Plan, which is to protect and manage and enhance, indeed extend, the tree canopy cover over London, which is currently 21%. And the ambition is that that's enhanced over the next 10 years by 5%. In real terms, this is an actual mapping of the urban forest of London. That's about 8.5 million trees there. And as there are about 8.5 million people in London, it's rather poetic, isn't it? That there's, you know, 1 tree per person. And that is all set within an important part of the London Plan, which is called the All London Green Grid, which is now being visualized in a very imaginative way, I think, as the foundation for being able to call London the first national park city. So this categorizes all the open space in London, and then it looks at how where the opportunities are for connectivity, for contact with nature, for skills, for heritage landscapes to be restored. It's a magnificent initiative that was brought forward by the first mayor of London in 2000. But it all starts at home, I believe. It's about cultivating and cultivating champions. And this is my studio. We want to inspire everyone to look to the future with optimism, and to look to the future feeling that you can participate in that future, that you know how you can contribute. And as landscape architects, I think this is our time. And recognizing that our work is never done. It is part of a continuum, as much about human aspiration as it is about the cumulative impact of urban nature. How nurturing that understanding and that love of nature uplifts our spirits. And it really does bridge that gap between the pressures of increased densification of the urban environment and our needs as human beings to be in contact with nature and natural processes. Like here, this is a tiny feral urban nature reserve. It is also a major art project. And it's where we held our first Landscape Learn event, and that's our social enterprise, bringing together people in this scruffy little place, a shared territory close to home, and very much full of life. So I wrote this book on called Conversations on Urban Forestry, on how the urban forest is as much about people as trees. As if we are to look optimistically, the urban habitat is growing faster than any other habitat on this planet. And that is a habitat that we've all designed. So then surely the quality, the character, the resilience of our urban environments is in our hands. And this is an endeavor that is multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, and that we must do together. Thank you.
Hi, Joe, can you hear us?
Yeah, perfectly. Yeah. Ah, thank goodness.
Thanks so much for your brilliant lecture and for your really insight in your work and in your whole methodology, connecting so much to the existing and being based so much on collaboration and involvement of communities. And I'm very happy now that Daniel Zimmermann is with us, who is partner of one of the major landscape offices in Vienna, who's a landscape architect himself, also a trained gardener, I learned. I didn't know that before you started landscape architecture. He's also teaching widely, and he's very much involved into similar topics and processes and methodologies. So Daniel, I would like to invite you to respond to Joe and to maybe put forward some first questions from your side.
Thank you very much. I won't. Is this on? No.
Doch, doch.
Yep.
Hey, Joe, thank you very much. It's a little bit
We can also
just hanging around here.
we can see her there.
You're very small.
Yeah.
Joe, it was great to see the pictures and your slides and what we talked in the past before, because we had some kind of conversation about the projects. And what I do love at Joe's work and at the office work is this kind of combination between being active as a human being, motivation out of the bottom of the heart, and these ideas of saying we as landscape architects have to deal with the future when we make projects. And I think Dalston shows us a lot about this kind of period, about these decades we're talking about. And when we plant a tree or we just create a garden and an open space, it's always about these decades. It's not like architecture, it's going to be open and they're going to make pictures and then human beings will come and destroy the architecture or whatever. The social aspect is always a very close part inside, and that's what I do love in your projects, Joe. And I think this kind of, to just come back to this kind of Austrian or Viennese kind of combination, how to bring your projects into this, in our surrounding, in our context. I think it's quite interesting this urban forestry thing you just create and tell and plant, and you see when you say, oh, that's my forest garden. What's an urban forest? What's an urban forest? Is it a park? Is it a forest? Is it a kind of habitat? It's a kind of topos we don't have like that right now in Vienna, I would say. And that's something when we talk about climate change and when we talk about plant trees, as you just painted on the wall of your house, is it something where you just give us some more input for that? Because when we say, okay, there's an area and we have the Stadtgartenamt and they tell us it's going to be planted like that and these are the kinds of trees and the sizes of trees, whatever. this kind of processing, just this kind of coming back and dealing with the factor of time, that's something we might not have, like you showed in your projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no time to lose, right? And the best time to plant trees is 20 years ago. So, you know, we're working in a rearguard action. So we mustn't feel like we can sit back. And it's almost like the tree is too simple. Like we need to have a man-made thing to sort out our climate change issues. And, you know, there are some good PV, some photovoltaic panels, and there's more, you know, there's going to be great innovation in batteries and all of that. But my goodness, something that we can all do, and I think this is the thing that I feel so passionate about, is, you know, when you involve people in planting trees, research shows that it doesn't just give a great sense of achievement and pleasure at that moment of planting, but it also creates better citizens, and you're more likely to volunteer and to be part of environmental projects in the future if you've planted trees. So I think there's one aspect of it that I love, which is that everyone can do it, and it's very good value for money. But there's also another aspect that I love about the urban forest, which is you can think of it in terms of a citywide strategy, which is so exciting. And I'm part of the scientific committee for World Urban Forestry. And we're going to have a conference in Washington, DC next October. And already it's sparked this imagination of 150 cities across the world to identify their urban forest. And that means mapping it, it means understanding who's responsible for it, collaborating agencies, whether it's the highways authorities, whether it's park authorities, whether it's community groups, whether it's the forestry commission, it doesn't matter. There needs to be, once you've identified this entity, which is all the trees, all the woodlands, all the forests as one canopy, is a very powerful thing because it relates to everyone. And it makes a huge difference to the microclimate and the livability of our cities. And I'll give you one example of that, which is in Lyon, in France, where businesses were moving out of the center of France because they had a series of summers where the temperature went over 45 degrees in the center of Lyon. And so Frédéric Ségur, who's an amazing landscape architect, said, right, we're going to create a forest charter. And they dug up huge urban motorways and planted woodlands. And they recognized that if they could not reduce the temperature in the city, not only are people going to be of ill health, but people are going to move away. And it's had an enormous impact. So I love that idea of a tree charter because it is so inclusive. So it's one aspect that you can plug in lots of other aspects of urban rejuvenation, regeneration, whatever you want to call it, which might be to do with productive landscapes, to do with creating active landscapes, connectivity between communities. It's got so many different dimensions. I think that's why I get so excited about it.
This example you just now described of Lyon, this charter de l'Arbor, etc. It was about 15 or 20 years ago when they started in Lyon and Bordeaux as well. And you know, I think this kind of urban forest plan for London, as you described it, where you say 25% of the total area of the city of London should be covered by tree canopies.
Yeah.
That's just unbelievable. And do you mean the idea comes from this kind of Lyon example?
No, it came from our forefathers. You know, the Victorians, they started planting the London plane tree, which is a phenomenally good at adapting to the horrendous situations we present to it in terms of pollution, compacted soils, very, very small amount of cubic meterage of soils. And it happens to be a tree that has so far, touch wood, been able to be resilient in that environment. And so a lot of the tree planting, which constitutes that 21%, which is our existing canopy cover, are large species trees, and a lot of that is plain trees. But there's also a wide range of other trees that people plant in their front gardens. 60% of the urban forest of London is held within private land. So that just shows you how important it is that every individual gets involved.
I think this is something very crucial that became very clear in your lecture, that of course also in Vienna we have these big parks, also historical parks, so we have a lot of green in Vienna, like concerning square meter, but the question of the doorstep, that you have your green and your tree really close to your doorstep, I think that's much more complicated because it's a congested ground, and you never know whom it belongs to, a lot of private interests, a lot of car interests, a lot of traffic interests interfering. So also what you told about the future of the Elston curve, it's very complicated, huh? To keep it going, to make it really sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think these are cultural shifts that you're talking about, especially with the car. You know, where really, if I can suggest something for Vienna, you try and find some meanwhile spaces, and I'm sure you do this already, most cities do, and you test out an idea. So the authorities don't have to get too het up about it, because you can say it's only for a temporary period. And then you gauge and you monitor and the reaction. And I can tell you it's a very, very efficient way of changing people's attitudes, because we did that with a street. And we said, we just want to have a party in the street. We want to close the street temporarily. And we had a party in it. We held it closed. The traffic the traffic engineers got it wrong. It didn't create problems elsewhere. And then we dug up some of that roadway and planted trees in the road. So it's just a process of being imaginative about how you negotiate and being quite clever, almost like a double agent, really, in sort of identifying the benefits for everyone. So if you de-pave a street, there's going to be less of an issue with flooding. Therefore, you won't have your sewer overflowing into the river because it's overloaded with good rainwater. So you talk to the drainage engineers about that. So it's a question of being very strategic about your discussions and negotiations, and then setting that within the cities and Vienna's overall policy areas. So you work to the politicians, their priorities, and you frame up these ideas which can be easily and economically achieved, but which in the rollout, and if there were many of them, would have enormous impact. So I really like this idea of a cumulative impact and using temporary status to try and shift perceptions that are ingrained.
You just told a lot of things there, more I say. You frame up for the authorities, to frame up for politicians, to frame up for whomever. Would you like to come to Vienna and tell them? I tried it the last 20 years to frame up and give this message. It's not sorry, but...
No, I'm not certain. It's not easy.
There's even another issue when I'm looking at your project. So it's really also about inventing a different form of nature. So it's urban nature, it's not nature, and it has, sometimes it looks a little bit informal or ephemeric. And I also had these discussions with the administration in Vienna or politicians. You know, Vienna is a very paternalistic city with a long social democratic tradition for more than 100 years. And they keep telling me, you know, what people want is a real park, a representative park, like they are used to imperial gardens, and if you just give them something, you know, which looks like brownfield development or like people don't like it, so it doesn't have a certain value. And I'm not sure if that's true. Like if you look at the Elston Park, I don't know, did it happen to you as a planner that you were told it has to look right? It has to look representative?
It's very often, we as landscape architects know that sometimes we do not have this kind of typuses of parks or open land or woodlands that are in between. They have to be proper, or they're just woodland. So it always depends on the departments. Which department is responsible for, and that makes in kind of diversity no sense. Sorry, Joe.
Yeah, but I think, you know, it's very interesting if we're talking about the biodiversity crisis, that actually the natural landscape, the so-called, you know, semi-natural in an urban environment, semi-natural landscapes have so much more ecological interest than those that are formally managed. And I think management, or as we like to call it, caretaking, is a fine art. It's about communicating an intent, involving people, you know, whether it's in bird watching or whether it's in pond dipping or whether it's identifying naturally regenerated trees. There's nothing wrong with trees that get there themselves. That's cheap, they're going to be resilient, they'll probably grow much faster than if you plant them, especially when we've got these big droughts that we have in the city. So I think it's for all of us, with our passion and with our knowledge, to invite, and this is what the social enterprises has done, and really will come, Landscape Learn will come to Vienna. It's amazing, everyone gets it. We do these walks, we look at what we call, say, incidental green infrastructure. That's green infrastructure that's arrived by itself. It might be down a drip line underneath a railway viaduct, and down that drip line you have mosses and you have all sorts of lichens that are growing, and it's very beautiful, and it contributes a lot to the biodiversity of the city, just in small incremental parts, but all added together. And it's sort of opening eyes to, you know, I mean, you could call it rewilding, but it's that sense that we can have, we can cohabit, that we've got this sense of the pluriverse, that the urban fox is as welcome and as valid as the rural fox. The urban bird is ever, you know, is as important as the bird that lives out in the countryside. Because actually, what's happening with our intensive agriculture is that there's less and less biodiversity happening within the agricultural landscape, and actually, ironically, in the urban ecology, it's very, very rich in biodiversity. So that's such an interesting thing to discuss. And I think we found when we have communities that come on walks with us or that participate in our events, there's such interest in that. So I think perhaps it's just that people haven't been invited to discuss, to look, to engage. They just take for granted a certain way of management of their parks. And some historic parks, that's fine. But there's lots of different types of landscape in a city. And it's acknowledging that all those different landscapes create, you know, the interest and the character and their identity of the different neighborhoods.
with whom exactly would you say you talk? Whom do you tell what you just said right now? Who is it? Is it the normal neighbor?
Yeah, we have, for instance, Daniel, I do a lot of careers advice in schools because there is no careers advice on landscape architecture. No one knows about it. I can't believe it. I graduated 40 years ago and still no one knows about it. Yeah, really? It's all over. So I go into schools, I talk to 14-year-olds, and if they're interested in doing work experience, they come and do a week with us in their half term. I cannot tell you how impressed I am by them. And I gave one work experience girl my report that I'd written for the Transport for London on sustainable urban drainage, a guide to sustainable urban drainage. Now, you would have thought for a 14-year-old cool girl, that would be very dull. And I said, will you read that and tell me what you think? And she read it and she came back to me and she said, why don't we all know about this? This is fascinating. And I said, well, go back to your school, disconnect every downpipe, make a rain garden so that all that good rainwater isn't going into the sewer, talk about less mowing of the garden so that you have some wildflowers. It's all within our reach. It means less money, not more money, but it's an attitude and it's confidence in understanding natural processes. So to answer your question, who's interested? Everyone's interested. When we do our walks, and you can see some of them in our talks on our Landscape Learn website, we have a total cross-section of people joining us, from young people who are interested in maybe landscape as a career, through to people who are very knowledgeable, like retired engineers who are really interested in city making, to all sorts of people in between. I mean, it's just, and very diverse culturally. There's a real sense of urgency, I feel, that is easy to ignite in the community if we can be bothered and have the generosity of giving our time to share our knowledge.
But one thing is events like walks and actions. The other thing is the long-term perspective. And you mentioned the role of caretakers. And I think that's very crucial. You also mentioned that there is a social enterprise around the Delson curve. Because in Vienna, we have a lot of community infrastructure also in social housing, like community spaces, shared spaces, and many of them, after certain years, they get locked and are almost never open because there are no caretakers, like who has the key, who is taking care, who is doing the cleaning, who is organizing, and all this. And I think it's the same with green spaces or with open spaces. So do you have some advice how to organize this caretaking? Because I think self-organization is not enough. There has to be more than that, maybe.
There does. I think there needs to be a commitment from the, what we call the TRA here, which is Tenants Residents Association. So it's the Housing Association needs to have a commitment in terms of a position. Now that, I'm not talking about a janitor that cleans floors and locks up gates. It's really a gardener with gardening skills who has the ability to communicate and who, while she are doing their job on the estate in that neighborhood, can involve people or can talk to people, can act as an ambassador for a new way of looking at our city. So, and there are so many good young people coming out of Horticultural College who would love to have that position. So what we say to the developers that we work with, it's your duty to make that position and to incorporate that as part of the planning conditions. And then, as you say, with people who come and go in the neighborhood, some people move away, you need someone who's got the overall plan of action in mind, and who can guide and teach and encourage people to become involved and gain confidence in this. And then what we're doing is we're creating new naturalists. We're creating people who will go out. They won't just look after and become involved in the environments which are on their doorsteps. They will then, this is what this research shows, go on and be part of wider, bigger environmental movements. And I think, Rachel Carson in Silent Spring, all those years ago, talked about this. She talked about not big moves, but lots and lots of small moves which are carefully curated so that they are accessible. And we don't put ourselves as a bunch of professionals on a pedestal which are not accessible. We need to be accessible. So, and our clients need to pay us in time to be accessible, because it takes time. You need to be available, not 9 till 5, but on an evening, on a Saturday, whenever it is. So it is about encouraging, the briefs to be written right, encouraging our clients to be all embracing in the way in which they don't just deliver for now, but they're really looking to the future and to investing in the communities that are then going to nurture those environments, which will just lead to success, whatever success means. It will enable those projects to actually be something that can provide for the future.
Yeah, situation has been aggravated, and so I think the times of climate change and the necessity of climate change adaptation helps us to increase this value of green or urban forest or trees or the whole discipline of landscape architecture in the urban surrounding in cooperation. I think it's really quite interesting when you not talked a lot right now today, but you always work very close to other disciplinarities, like architecture, traffic engineers, etc., and water maintenance stuff. And I think that's one of those big exercises we have to deal right now. As well as we do have in Austria, as you work in UK now, the last decades now, and do you have the feeling that there is something totally changing out of this kind of cooperation, in this kind of interdisciplinarity, or is it just a kind of knowing each other, working together, and so the kind of work you do becomes better?
No, I think it's absolutely vital. I think we cannot work in silos. I get so fed up with proposals that are put forward by design teams that are called landscape-led development, and there's not a landscape architect on the team. I think we have to recognize, and indeed, it's so enjoyable, isn't it, to work with an ecologist, an archaeologist, an arboriculturalist, an architect, an engineer, a geotechnical engineer, a hydrologist. This is a fascinating, interconnected, multidisciplinary opportunity. And quite frankly, I don't think working in silos is going to create any kind of innovative thinking, the sort and the quantum that we need to be able to mitigate or to come up with solutions that can tackle climate change. And so why would we? What now is the opportunity for us to create that platform for us all to be able to work together. And we have to be very vigorous in saying to our clients, if we don't believe that the right team is being appointed, that there should be other members of the team engaged right from the start, not down the line, but right from the start, in order to shape the project and to fulfill its full potential. And often, if that is not forthcoming, we will simply move away from that project. So I really do think that it's on all our shoulders. We can't just wait, and neither can we wait, and neither can we accept some of the very poor briefs that we receive. And if it means that we jeopardize our position in saying that there needs to be a fuller, more rounded approach, then so be it. You know, I think we have to take action now. We must not be apathetic, and I feel that very strongly. And there is enough work out there, and you know, we have a reputation apparently for being very serious, and I don't mind that reputation. I am serious about it, you know, but I also want to enjoy, you know, that wonderful frisson that you get in a multidisciplinary team when everyone is coming at a challenge from their different perspectives and you see the light. It's a wonderful feeling. That's why we continue to design, even though it's a hard gig a lot of the time.
We have to take action. Maybe that's a good keyword for asking the audience, among them many experienced landscape architects, if you have any questions.
I just want to.
If not, you step in.
No, just.
Yes. Just a second.
This sentence Joe just told me yesterday: start influencing. That's what you do right now, Joe, what you do, Angelica, what we do, start influencing. I think it has something very soft, intelligent.
Yeah.
Please.
Hello, is it working? Yeah, it's working. I have a question about social sustainability, especially about the project in Making Space in Dalston. You were talking about the community and the neighborhood you were working with. And in this case, I have a question about gentrification and green gentrification, if it was a topic, and how the public spaces or green spaces, or which role they had or are having at the moment, and if there are seen any signs of this process of gentrification or not. And maybe a follow-up question, do you see ways or tools within the landscape architecture which are slowing down such processes like gentrification, or even pretend starting it?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's inevitable. But there are ways in making, there are ways in ensuring that there is open access to all. And I think I don't know whether you have this sort of social enterprise business set up in Austria. It's been a fantastic, I think it was a British invention, but I'm not sure. So it's not a charity and not a sort of a community group. It's halfway between. And what it enables is for the management of a place like the Dalston Eastern Curve to be based on community priorities. So because all they are interested in doing as a governance structure is reinvesting in the community and ensuring that the community needs are met. So yes, in creating the Dalston Eastern Curve, which was alongside a lot of new housing as well. You know, you could say prices, you know, inevitably prices have gone up. But what the garden management does is it maintains a very important critical infrastructure to access to that garden, so that it's free. There's no one that can take it over for a private party or anything like that. There are engagement with a huge variety of community groups that take priority over everything else, that it provides for safe play and safe relaxation, that there's the ability to get involved through volunteering. So I think the gentrification issue, if it becomes then a situation where parts of the community are excluded from access to that green space, I think that's a real problem. We can't, it's very difficult for us to control the process of gentrification, but what we can do is try to encourage and help the setting up of the governance structures to maintain the ethos of those green spaces and who they were to be providing for into the future. So it's something that always it troubles me. You know, it troubles me. My children can't afford to live in the neighborhood I live in. So, you know, there's migration happening all the time in the city. But you could say that the green spaces are the democratic spaces, which, if managed and maintained in that way, will act as a continuum as a city evolves.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience? From your side, Daniel? It's almost 9 o'clock here in Vienna, so maybe we should also come to an end. Your final question?
No, I didn't find a question. I just have some sentences I just would like to repeat, Joe, if it's... Good social housing can't work without nature contact. I think that's a sentence that really hurts me in a good manner. I think to fall in love with nature, it just touches me. And so I get this kind of, it helps me. It helps me with other human beings, helps me in the surrounding, in the neighborhood, to fall in love with nature. I think that's a great sentence. Sorry. I just wanted to repeat.
And I think it's very sad to acknowledge this, but I think it's true that only now, after we went through the pandemics, I think we can really fully understand these sentences. Maybe 2 years ago it might have sounded kitschy, like, okay. But now it's, yes, of course, we all need this. I think.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. If we can't use the pandemic, which created a seismic global change, if we can't use that, the knowledge that we gained from that period now to shape the world for the future and future resilience, then I really will be upset. Because certainly it was the open spaces, the landscapes were our only escape, and maintained our sort of health and well-being. So I think that has to be, I think that's a really good point, that has to be held on to. And policy needs to, we did a lot of research through the pandemic, and a lot of other institutions have, that needs to be used as a backup and as a reminder going forward.
Yeah, I hope that from this crisis we are learning more than from former crises like the financial crisis in 2008, I thought we would learn a lot for the urban realm and for like the whole building sector. We didn't, like the whole real estate speculation. It didn't really change. So I'm always hopeful, but I really hope this time the learnings will be more sustainable, maybe. Would be very nice. Joe, it was so great to have you here, at least via Zoom, and I really hope that you can join us again and next time in person, and that we can really welcome you in Vienna and share a glass of wine with you maybe, and also have some informal discussions. So thanks such a lot for sharing your great knowledge and your great experience. It was really very valuable for Vienna. I think also for the IBA, for the International Building Exhibition on Social Housing, which are very much also following these topics and this kind of mission to create this kind of doorstep quality for each one. I think this is very crucial for a new form of social housing. And also thanks a lot to Daniel for joining us tonight as a respondent and for kind of carrying on this experience in the Viennese context.
Thank you very much, Joe. And last sentence, I just want to say, you just said the 20th century was the century of architecture. And the 21st century is the century of landscape architecture.
I did.
I love
and
will
anyone
be
who
probably.
Yes, and I just find, I want to say thank you to you for everyone's patience and in the hiccups at the beginning. And do come by the studio if any of you are in London.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Bye.